Hello BookTube. Today I am finally going to do the new Windows and Mirrors reading tag. This tag was created 2 months ago by Pat of Book Chat with Pat. I will leave a link to her channel in the show notes down below, as well as mentions of the books that I'm going to talk about and the booktubers I will be shouting out. For each prompt, I will be selecting either 3 books or 3 booktubers. After I read off each prompt, I will also mention some of the struggles that I've had with making this video. I have been trying to do this tag video for 2 months now, so wish me luck. Prompt number 1. Talk about a few books that served as mirrors to you, allowing you to see some aspect of your life experience reflected in a meaningful way. So the first book I have selected is a big work of history, but it's also something of a placeholder, and that is A Big Wonderful Thing, A History of Texas by Stephen Harrigan. This is a big narrative history of the state of Texas, which is a part of the United States. It is told in a humorous style that I often describe as being how history should be written. This is one of the 2 books that I read in 2020 that really got me into history. But this isn't quite the book that I wanted to start off with. The book that I'm looking for is probably a novel, although I guess it could also be memoir, and maybe there is a memoir out there. I just haven't read it yet because I'm not really all that into memoirs, but going on. What I'm looking for is about a person who has complicated, conflicting, contradictory feelings towards the concept of home, whether that's the physical structure where they live or the community in which they reside, whether that community is a town or city or a state or even a country, and trying to find where they belong, whether that's where they are or moving somewhere else. And I think the reason why I picked Big Wonderful Thing for this prompt, even though this book is not about what I'm looking for, is because it does reflect the fact that I am a multi-generational Texan, and I do have complicated and contradictory feelings towards that. My second choice is a bit more on the nose, and that is The Swimming Pool Library by Allan Hollinghurst. Ignore the fact that this is a novel set in the early 1980s in London and is about a wealthy young gay man who spends most of his time working out and having sex. At the beginning of the novel, he saves the life of an elderly gay aristocrat, and they form something of a odd friendship that has a lot of mentor-mentee elements to it. And the narrator is asked to write this aristocrat's biography, and in so doing, he gets a crash course in hidden aspects of 20th century gay life in London. I selected this book because me and the narrator share a lot of personality traits. And I think that's sort of why I have something of a love-hate relationship with this novel. Every other time I read the novel, I either successfully finish it or bail on it, depending on how annoyed I am with the narrator, which often end up being annoyed with myself as well. So that's why I selected this novel. And sticking with that theme of contradictions, the third book I'm selecting is a manga series, My Hero Academia by Kohei Horikoshi. My Hero Academia is inspired by American superhero comics, and is about a young man named Izuku Midoriya who loves superheroes. He wants to be one. But in a world in which 80% of the population has superpowers called quirks, Izuku is part of the 20% who do not. He is quirkless. But he still aspires to be a superhero. At the beginning of the series, an act of bravery of his inspires the greatest hero in Japan, All Might, to take him on as an apprentice. And after some training, Izuku is granted All Might's quirk, One for All, which can be passed on, and if previous users or current users have their own quirks, those quirks are added to the overall One for All. And this allows Izuku to go to a superhero school to train to be a superhero as the world that All Might built begins to crumble with a new generation of villains. I picked this book for one of my mirror choices because there's an aspect of Izuku's character where he mumbles to himself, where he gets caught up in his own head. And that is reflective of something that goes on with myself. I am very often caught up in my own head as well. So, those were my choices for prompt number 1. Moving on to prompt number 2. Talk about a couple of booktubers whose reading is most like your own. Now, my choices here are going to involve some headache-induced squinting. So before I get to the booktubers, let me give a quick rundown of what my reading tastes are like as of 12:36 p.m. Central Time on November 12th, 2025. So right now, where I'm at in my reading life, the genre that I enjoy the most, that chances are the best that I'm going to enjoy what I'm reading, is manga, Japanese comics. I got into manga most recently in 2020, at the end of 2020. And I just fell back in love with the genre. And over the subsequent 5 years, I have added a tremendous amount of manga to my collection. In fact, my bedroom can rightly be described as the little manga room, because I have pretty much all of my manga collection in my bedroom, and it's fairly packed. Also in 2020, I started to get into history. But while I read a lot of history in the 5 years since, I've started to find myself less and less interested in history, particularly the last year and a half. I don't know if that's has anything to do with something going on with me or with the world around me, but I'm just not enjoying history nearly as much as I once did, particularly more academic history. As far as other nonfiction, as much as I tell myself I really should expand my nonfiction reading to other genres of nonfiction, it hasn't happened yet. Moving on to fiction, I'm going to start with genre fiction. So for a very long time, my favorite genre of fiction has been science fiction and fantasy. But starting at the end of 2019, I began to lose interest in the prose form of science fiction and fantasy. And that decline in interest has pretty much run its course, and I have no interest in adult science fiction and fantasy. I can't even. I mean, it's not working. That said, it's not like science fiction and fantasy has completely left my life. My interest in science fiction and fantasy, or my love of science fiction and fantasy, has largely gravitated more towards manga again, as well as film and television as well. But prose form, no. The other genres in genre fiction, no, I haven't been interested in any of them for a very long time. Mostly detective fiction. The one exception would be Agatha Christie, but even with her, it's been about 2 or 3 years now since the last time I read and enjoyed one of her novels. I might try again in the new year for March Mystery Madness to see if I can reignite my interest in her work or not. I still have the omnibuses of some of her novels, so we shall see. Moving on to classic fiction and modern and contemporary literary fiction, I was interested in them in the period of my life where I most enjoyed them was in my late teens and early 20s. Since then, I've largely, they don't work as well for me anymore. Even when I try to reread books that I remember having enjoyed when I was younger, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. And when I do read or attempt to read a work of classic fiction or modern and contemporary literary fiction, for the most part, I bail or I don't finish. And on the rare occasions that I do finish, I'm left with it. Is that it? It doesn't work for me. But there is also a recurring annoyance, frustration, in that I do get the periodic urges to keep trying, even though they never work out, which is a video subject for a different day. And that leads me to poetry. I gotta go. Sorry about that. I had an emergency I needed to take care of. So where was I? Okay, so poetry. I do have something of a sweet tooth for contemporary poetry, although it's hard to explain my relationship with contemporary poetry. So that's roughly where my tastes are at this moment. So what booktubers come close, even with some headache-induced squinting to my reading tastes? So first I'm going to shout out Lindy of Lindy Magpie Reads. She is a Canadian booktuber currently living in Victoria who formerly lived in Edmonton, and her channel is delightful. She talks about what she's read, as well as sometimes talking about what she's been cooking, her knitting projects, and she quite often includes vlog style videos of her excursions in Victorian other places in Canada. While we don't share much in common taste-wise, I do think we share similar tastes in poetry, if not the same poets. My second choice and my second shout out, is Justin of Triumphal Reads. When I first started watching his channel, he is a booktuber who lives in Maine. He talked about, I think there was an even split between science fiction, fantasy, and history, or it was more science fiction and fantasy, and gradually over the years he has talked more about history and science, which is similar to my own reading journey, away from science fiction and fantasy to more history, although not including the manga. We also share a taste in ancient history, although he focuses more on Greece and Rome, I think, while I'm more interested in Egypt and the Near East. Thirdly, I'm going to shout out Michael K. Vaughn, who is a booktuber from California. He focuses a lot on pulp fiction, although earlier he also read heavily in like older works of history and classic literature. But I'm shouting him out because he is the only booktuber I'm subscribed to who reads comics as much as I do, although his focus is on American superhero comics, while my focus is on manga. Prompt number 3. Talk about a few books that served as a window frames to you, allowing you to see the reality of others outside of your experience. Now, this prompt has given me some trouble, and I don't think I'm still quite understanding what Pat is trying to get at. So my choices for this prompt will be the books that introduced me to certain genres. And I'm going to start with the other book that introduced me to history in addition to Big Wonderful Thing. And that is Post-Wall, Post-Square by Kristina Spohr. This is a history of the end of the Cold War. From the collapse of the communist regimes in Eastern Europe, represented by post-war, and also the events of Tiananmen Square, the post-square. So this is a history that goes from the very late 80s to early 90s. And when I read it back in 2020, it was a delight. I really enjoyed it, although I have not read it since. But this is one of the two works, Big Wonderful Thing being the other one, that really got me into history, even if briefly. My second choice is Word of Mouth, an anthology of gay American poetry edited by Timothy Liu. This is one of the first books that I ever bought from Book People when I went to visit my alma mater, St. Edward's University in Austin, a long time ago. After I toured the campus, I went to Book People and bought 2 books, this one being one of them. This anthology introduced me to a number of gay poets. It also introduced me to modern and contemporary poetry, which I have had a soft spot for ever since, even though there had been a long interregnum between this period and when I started to get back into poetry a few years ago. You can go over there. And finally, Naruto by Masashi Kishimoto for manga. So Naruto is about a young man named Naruto Uzumaki, who on the day of his birth, a monstrous 9-tailed demon fox attacked his birth village of Konoha. The leader of Konoha, the Hokage, defeated the fox and sealed it into newborn Naruto. Subsequently, Naruto grew up as the village outcast, the village pariah, and in response, Naruto became the village idiot, the class clown. aspiring to become Hokage himself. When the story begins, Naruto is a student at the Ninja Academy, hoping to graduate. After some struggle, he does graduate and is assigned a 3-person cell alongside his fellow classmates Sasuke Uchiha and Sakura Haruno under the tutelage of Kakashi. Naruto is an incredibly popular manga, and this is and Naruto is one of the manga that got me into manga a number of years ago. While I had 2 manga periods. One was in the late 2000s, very early 2010s, and most recently starting in late 2020. And I read a few volumes of manga a few volumes of Naruto back then and enjoyed it. But I never really fully read the entire series until I started collecting Naruto in late 2020, early 2021. So that's my 3rd selection. Now, for the final prompt outside of tagging people. Talk about a couple of BookTube channels that have expanded your horizons, helped you explore books or genres outside of your comfort zone, or challenged you in some way. So, first off, I'm going to shout out Steve Donahue. I'd initially thought about placing Steve Donahue in the mirror part of this tag because we do share a number of tastes in common, but with Steve, he's so widely read in so many genres that he can't really help but be a mirror to other genres. And in fact, it was Steve Donahue's channel that introduced me to reading history for its own sake rather than just research or inspiration. My next shout out is Roz of Skeledangling About the Books. She is a booktuber who focuses on classics as well as global literature, and her focus on both tries to get me into the classics or give them a try, even if it doesn't necessarily succeed. And my 3rd shout out is Greg of Supposedly Fun. Greg is a booktuber who reads widely, mainly literary fiction and more commercial fiction. Not tell you. I guess you could say more commercial, genreless fiction. But what I'm going to mainly focus on is that Greg also follows a number of book prizes. In addition to the Bookers and the Women's Prize, he also focuses on the Pulitzer and the National Book Award and the Nobel Prize and others. And his channel, as well as other booktubers who do focus on book prizes, can sometimes get me wishing that I could follow along with a book prize or two myself, even if, again, it probably would not work out. And when I have tried, it did not work out. But yeah, I love watching his Pulitzer Prize prediction videos, his Nobel Prize in Literature reaction videos. They're always just so much fun. Anyway, if you would like to do this tag, consider yourselves tagged. And before I forget, anyway, BookTube, I'm going to go ahead and sign off for now and go check on my mom to make sure she is okay. And I will be back hopefully tomorrow with another video. Because there's 2 or 3 that I'm thinking of doing. So anyway, thank you. Have a great afternoon and stay safe.